I donated my kidney to save my son's life. 5 days after the surgery, he handed me a stack of documents and sent me to a nursing home. But just minutes later, a doctor rushed in with panic on his face. What he said next froze my son where he stood. Before the story begins, please write in the comments which city you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so Stories with Meaning can continue sharing powerful stories like this. I woke up to a sharp pain in my abdomen, as if something inside me was being pulled apart. The surgical lights above were blinding. "Mrs. Helen Moore, please don't move too much yet," a young woman said softly beside me. Her name was Nina, a nurse assigned to my room. She gently steadied my shoulders. "Is the surgery over?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, ma'am. The transplant was successful. Your kidney has been transferred to your son. Dr. Lawson will explain everything later. For now, please rest." My son's name is Adrian Moore. Just days earlier, he had been lying pale and weak in a hospital bed. Kidney failure. The doctor said only a transplant could save him. "What if I don't make it, Mom?" he asked then, his voice trembling. "If my kidney can be used, take it," I said without hesitation. "I only have you." Dr. Michael Lawson warned me of the risks. I was 64 years old. Living with one kidney meant dialysis later. "I don't care," I told him, "as long as Adrian lives." Now it was done. My body felt heavy, but knowing Adrian had survived brought a small sense of peace. Days passed. The incision healed slowly, though the pain lingered. On the 5th day, Nina helped me sit in a chair beside my bed. "Take it easy, Mrs. Moore. Your son has been moved to this wing. He'll be here soon." Not long after, the door opened. Adrian walked in slowly, wearing a patient's gown. He still looked pale, but his eyes were alive. Behind him was his wife, Clara, pushing an IV stand and carrying a brown folder. "Mom," Adrian smiled, "how are you?" "Still sore, but seeing you like this makes me happy." I reached for his hand. It was warm. "Thank God the surgery worked," Clara said. "We don't know how to repay you." "I did it willingly," I replied. "That's all that matters." Clara sat down and opened the folder. Papers spread across the small table. "Mom," Adrian said, his tone suddenly stiff, "there are some documents we need you to sign for your care going forward." "What kind of documents?" I asked. Adrian took a breath. "After surgery, you'll need ongoing care. It's difficult at our house. I work full-time, Clara does too. The kids are noisy. We found a good nursing home." "A nursing home?" My tongue went numb. "It's clean," Clara added quickly. "You'll have people your age, nurses around the clock. You won't have to worry about housework." I looked at Adrian. He didn't look cruel, just overwhelmed. He had always been like that, afraid of not having enough, afraid of failing. "And these papers?" I asked, pointing at the stack. Clara slid one toward me with a pen. "This is consent for relocation to the facility, and this one is the property transfer. The house will be officially under Adrian's name. It will make administrative matters easier." The house, my only asset. I scanned the small print. Full transfer of ownership without future claims. "My house," I whispered. Adrian squeezed my hand. "Mom, you always said the house would be mine someday. We're just making it official. I helped with the mortgage too. You don't need to worry. Everything at the facility will be covered." Images flashed through my mind. My wedding ring sold years ago, the small grocery stall I once ran. But I swallowed everything. "If this gives you peace of mind," I said softly, "then sign it." Nina came in to support my back. My hand trembled as I held the pen. One by one, I signed the papers. It felt like letting go of something I had held my entire life. "Thank you, Mom," Clara said. "The nursing home ambulance will pick you up this afternoon." "Don't forget me," I joked weakly. "I won't," Adrian said, nodding. They left. The room fell silent again. I stared at the bandage on my abdomen. The small house we'd lived in for decades, now legally Adrian's. I would be going to a nursing home. Then the door burst open. Dr. Lawson rushed in, breathing hard. "Mrs. Moore, where is Adrian?" "He just left. What's wrong, doctor?" He opened a file, his face tense. "We've received the full results of your remaining kidney function. It's much weaker than we expected." My heart raced. "What does that mean?" "You cannot leave medical supervision without a clear financial guarantor. If you miss regular checkups or can't afford potential dialysis, you're at high risk of total kidney failure." He looked at me straight. "I heard you're being transferred to a nursing home and that your house has already been signed over to your son. Is that true?" I nodded. "I just signed." At that moment, the door opened again. Adrian and Clara stood frozen when they saw the doctor's expression. Dr. Lawson turned to them, his voice cold. "Mr. Moore, your mother gave you a kidney to save your life. Her remaining kidney is fragile. She needs long-term monitoring and serious financial support. You've taken all her assets and sending her to a low-facility nursing home. If she needs dialysis, who will pay?" Adrian froze. The folder slipped from his hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Clara spoke quickly. "But, doctor, the nursing home has nurses. They work with insurance programs. Surely it's enough." "I'm speaking medically. She needs a responsible guarantor. Dialysis is expensive." Adrian swallowed. "We'll figure it out later." He didn't look at me. I spoke instead. "It's okay, doctor. I don't want to burden my son. Whatever happens, I'll handle it." Dr. Lawson looked at me disappointed. "You're too kind," he murmured. "I'll note the need for strict follow-ups. Please don't neglect them." Hours later, the nursing home ambulance arrived. Nina helped me into a wheelchair. "What belongings will you bring?" she asked. "Just a small bag. The rest is no longer mine." Adrian walked me to the parking lot. Clara was already on the phone discussing home renovations. Before entering the ambulance, I looked at my son. "Visit me often, okay?" "Yes, Mom, when work isn't too busy." "I trust you." The ambulance drove away. Through the small window, Adrian shrank into distance, then disappeared. The tightness in my chest wasn't from my kidney. It was from feeling abandoned. The nursing home was on the outskirts of Cleveland. 2 floors, peeling paint, clean enough inside. A nurse greeted me. "Welcome, Mrs. Moore. I'm Nina." Only then did I realize she wasn't a hospital nurse. She worked here too. "You work here too?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, I helped with hospital transfers today." She led me to my room. 2 beds. An elderly man with white hair sat by the window watching a small TV. "Mr. Harris, this is your new roommate, Mrs. Moore." He looked at me, eyes sharp beneath deep wrinkles. "Welcome to the final terminal," he said half-jokingly. I forced a smile. "I'm joking. Sort of. I'm Leonard Harris, former lawyer, now retired by life." That evening, I sat staring down the hallway, wheelchairs lined up, elderly residents staring into nothing. "First days are always full of hope," Leonard said. "People think their children will visit." "And later?" I asked. "They learn the pattern. Children forget." "My son is busy," I said quietly, "but he's a good man." Leonard raised an eyebrow. I hope so. That night, I waited for my phone to buzz. Nothing. I called instead. Clara answered. Hello, Mom? How's the place? Decent, right? Yes, it's fine. Adrian's in an online meeting. He's exhausted. I'll tell him you called. The line went dead. I stared at the dark screen. Days passed. Routine took over. Medication, porridge, short conversations, long naps. One afternoon, Nina came in with a phone. Your grandchildren are on video call. My face lit up. Lucas and Owen appeared on the screen. Grandma! How's school? I asked. Good. I'm great at math, Lucas said proudly. Then his expression changed. Grandma, why are you so far away? Nina placed the phone gently on the table. I stared straight ahead. My chest felt tight, as if something heavy was pressing from the inside. Are you okay, Mrs. Moore? Nina asked softly. My son told my grandchild that I chose to be here alone, I murmured, as if this had all been my idea. I didn't finish the sentence. Nina pulled a chair closer and sat down. Ma'am, I don't mean to interfere, she said carefully. But when you first arrived here, your condition was still very weak. Your IV marks were fresh. You could barely walk on your own. I turned my head slowly toward her. What are you trying to say? She bit her lower lip, hesitating. I saw the documents in the facility office, she continued carefully. They state that you've transferred ownership of your house, savings, all legal rights to Mr. Adrian Moore. My head began to spin. And, she added quietly, he also declared that he is no longer responsible as your medical guarantor after your admission here. The room felt smaller. So, if I get seriously ill again? I asked slowly. Administratively, Nina replied, lowering her voice, the nursing home can only assist within its limited capacity. If you need a major hospital or expensive treatment, the guarantor is usually family. I fell silent. Suddenly, Leonard Harris's words from earlier echoed in my mind. When I had complained about the bland food, he had muttered, once you're in here, it usually means you're considered finished. At the time, I thought it was just the bitterness of an old man. Now, the sentence felt different. Nina looked at me carefully. Mrs. Moore, did you truly agree to everything you signed? The question hung in the air. For the first time since the surgery, I began to question not how much I loved Adrian, but what Adrian had actually done to me. I didn't read everything, I finally admitted. My voice cracked. It was only a few days after surgery. Adrian said it was just paperwork, administrative stuff. I trusted him. Nina gently held my fingers. If you want, I can show you the documents the facility received. At least you'll know exactly what's written. I nodded slowly. She helped me into the wheelchair and pushed me down the hallway. The nursing home corridor felt colder than usual. Inside the small office near the nurses' station, she opened a drawer and took out a folder. These are copies of the documents we received. She laid them out in front of me. Photocopies of my ID, Adrian's ID, a power of attorney, consent for nursing home placement. The small print danced before my eyes. She pointed to a paragraph. Here, she said, with this, I, Helen Moore, transfer all ownership rights of my house and savings to my son, Adrian Moore, with no right to future claims. The words all and no right to claim stood out like scars. Another paragraph followed. I declare that from this point forward, my son is no longer obligated to act as my medical guarantor. My throat went dry. So, on paper, I whispered, Adrian has officially walked away. Administratively, Nina answered softly, yes. As to whether it's right or wrong, that's another matter. I'm just a nurse. I stared at my own name printed clearly beneath the shaky signature. It was mine, but I barely remembered signing it. Memories rushed in without warning. Late nights at the small food stall, Adrian asleep on a wooden bench, his head on my lap while I counted loose coins. The day I sold my gold bracelet, my mother's gift, so he could pay his college enrollment fee. The day he shouted at me after failing to get a scholarship. If we weren't poor, I wouldn't have to struggle like this. I had stayed silent then, pretended to be busy washing dishes, pretended my heart hadn't torn open. Later, I cooked his favorite noodles. Back in that small office, my tears dropped on the table. So all this time, I was slowly being removed, piece by piece. My kidney, my house, even my status as someone worth supporting. Nina looked like she wanted to hug me, but restrained herself. I don't know what to say, she whispered, but you deserve to know what's happening. It's your right. She wheeled me back to the room. The TV was still on, playing an afternoon soap opera. Leonard looked over as we entered. You look like someone who just heard a judge's verdict, I replied flatly, trying to joke. Nina excused herself and left us alone. For a few minutes, only the sound of the television filled the room. Mrs. Moore, Leonard said finally quietly, something's bothering you. I said, you used to be a lawyer. He shrugged. Long retired, but some things stick. I took a deep breath and told him everything, from the surgery, the documents, to what I had just discovered. The words poured out without filter. Maybe, I said softly, because I've never really had anyone to talk to. Leonard listened without interrupting. When he finished, he leaned back. Children afraid of poverty, afraid of inconvenience, parents become burdens to be removed nicely, he said bluntly. But this is bold. He withdrew as medical guarantor after you took your kidney. That takes nerve. I gave the kidney willingly, I insisted. True, he nodded, but that doesn't erase the fact that you're now in your weakest position. He continued calmly. And those documents were signed right after surgery. In law, we call this capacity. Someone seriously ill, recently operated on, isn't in the best condition to make major decisions. His simple words felt heavy. So, can what I signed still be challenged? I asked quietly. Leonard shrugged. I'm no longer practicing, but theoretically, documents signed under physical weakness, lack of understanding, or pressure can be disputed, especially with medical records and witnesses. Witnesses? I repeated. Nurses, doctors, anyone who saw your condition, medical records, anything showing you weren't stable. I thought of Nina, of Dr. Lawson rushing in that day. They saw me. They knew. The door opened gently. Nina came in with medication. Sorry to interrupt. Leonard glanced at her. Perfect timing. We were just talking about witnesses. Nina frowned. Witnesses? I briefly explained. She went quiet, then said softly, when you arrived here, your condition was recorded. Pale, IV marks visible. It's all in the system. Photos, too. Internal documentation. Internal records can still be evidence, Leonard said, as long as they're preserved. Nina nodded firmly. I'll make sure your records are not lost. Silence followed. Outside, slippers dragged across the floor as other residents passed. I don't intend to take my son to court, I said slowly. He's my only child. I'm not telling you to sue. I'm saying don't leave yourself with nothing. Life is harsh, even with one's own blood. I exhaled deeply. Part of me still wanted to believe Adrian had reasons, that he was pressured, that Clara pushed him. Another part, quiet but growing, felt hurt and betrayed. I always defended him, I murmured, no matter what he did. Maybe I helped shape who he is now. All parents make mistakes. The question is, will you keep staying silent or will you start protecting yourself? I looked at my wrinkled hands. I had lived my whole life for others, for my husband, then for Adrian. Now I had one kidney left, no house in my name, no legal guarantor. If I stayed silent, maybe my body would give up slowly. But I still want to see Lucas and Owen grow up, I said softly, half to them, half to myself. I don't want to die early just because I gave up. The words surprised even me. Nina smiled faintly. Then you already have a strong reason to survive. I nodded. Something shifted inside me. Not revenge, not yet. A small decision. I will live. I will take my medicine, attend checkups, listen to doctors. I will quietly gather everything that could protect me. If one day I have to speak up, I won't come empty-handed. That night, before sleeping, I touched the scar on my abdomen. I once thought my life ended the moment my kidney was taken. It hadn't. Maybe this was where I finally learned to live, not as Adrian Moore's mother, but as Helen Moore. A few weeks later, my days began to have a pattern. Light gymnasts in the morning, nap in the afternoon. He offered a faint smile, then checked my blood pressure and asked about my symptoms. After that, he opened his folder. "I've reviewed your latest lab results," Dr. Lawson said calmly. "The function of your remaining kidney has declined slightly. We need to monitor it very closely." "So," I asked quietly, "in the next few months, there's a strong possibility you may need to begin regular dialysis." He nodded. "Yes, and that requires not only funding, but strict discipline. You can't miss checkups. You can't stop taking medication." "Will this facility be enough?" I asked, glancing at Nina. Nina lowered her eyes. "The nursing home will do its best, doctor," she said carefully. "But if it reaches the level of routine dialysis at a major hospital—" Dr. Lawson nodded slowly. "I understand, Mrs. Moore. I need to be honest. Without a guarantor capable of covering the costs, the process can become extremely difficult." I stiffened. "I don't want to be a burden to Adrian. He already has his own responsibilities." "That's exactly why I'm concerned," he replied. "He has already taken one of your kidneys and your house. If he also withdraws financial responsibility, you will be the one who suffers most." He said it without anger, just facts. Yet each word felt like a blade cutting slowly. After the doctor left, the nursing home director called me into her office. A man in a button-down shirt sat there, his face full of calculations. "Mrs. Moore," he said politely, "we'd like to remind you about the monthly fees. For now, everything is covered, but if additional care is required in the future, we may need family participation. We've contacted Mr. Adrian Moore, but we haven't received a response yet." I nodded, holding back embarrassment. "I'll try contacting him again." That night, I called Adrian. The line rang several times before he finally answered. "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded rushed. "Hold on, I'm outside." "Adrian, the nursing home mentioned next month's fees," I said carefully. Yes, I'll transfer it," he replied quickly. "Sorry, Mom, I've got a lot going on. Work's intense, and the house renovation just finished. Exhausting, honestly." "The renovation looks nice," I said quietly. "I saw the photos. The house blessing?" There was a brief pause. "Oh, that," he said. Just something small. Felt wrong not to do it. I wasn't invited, I said, half joking. Mom, the place is far. You just had surgery. He laughed lightly. Were we supposed to carry you? Then more firmly, the important thing is you know the house is truly our family home now. Something strange tightened in my throat. Yes, I replied softly. I know. The call ended with a vague promise that he'd visit when he had time. I placed the phone on the small table beside the bed. Leonard Harris shook his head slowly. When people are happy, they usually forget who stood beside them when they were struggling. I wanted to argue, but I was too tired. A few days later, Nina entered with a mix of excitement and discomfort on her face. Mrs. Moore, you need to see this. She opened a video on her phone. It was a recording from a modest talk show filmed in an office setting. The caption read, "An inspiring journey from a humble family to a remarkable career." The guest being interviewed was Adrian. On screen, he sat neatly dressed in a button-up shirt, speaking confidently. "I was raised by a very strong single mother," Adrian said. "She ran a small food stall and worked tirelessly so I could get an education. Because of her sacrifices," he continued, "I'm now working in a real estate company. My focus now is securing the future of my small family." I waited for him to mention the surgery, the kidney, the nursing home. But until the video nearly ended, only polished words appeared. "I believe the best way to repay my mother is by becoming a successful son and bringing honor to the family," he concluded. Nina looked at me, waiting for my reaction. In the comments, people wrote, "Such a devoted son. Respect, man. Wishing you continued success." I smiled stiffly. My son was very good with words. Inside me, something churned. Not just sadness, anger was beginning to surface. All this time, I had searched excuses for him. He was tired, he was under pressure, he was afraid of falling into poverty. But seeing him sit there talking about gratitude while I lay in a nursing home bed with one kidney and no home, it became very hard to keep understanding. "When people are too afraid of being poor," Leonard said quietly, "they forget who they were poor with." I stared at the now dark screen. For the first time, a clear sentence formed in my mind, frightening yet oddly relieving. Maybe I need to stop defending Adrian and start defending myself. Weeks after seeing that video, my body began to protest more often. Shortness of breath, swollen legs, persistent dizziness. I thought it was just fatigue, until one morning as I stood up from bed, my vision went black. My knees buckled. "Mrs. Moore," Nina's voice sounded distant. I felt myself floating, then everything went dark. When I regained consciousness, I was in the emergency room. An IV needle pierced my hand. Nina sat beside me, her eyes swollen. "Thank God you're awake," she said. "You collapsed in your room. Your blood pressure dropped. The doctor says your kidney needs to be checked again." Not long after, Dr. Lawson entered carrying a folder. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Still dizzy," I replied. He opened the lab results. "Your kidney function has dropped significantly. If we delay, it could progress to total kidney failure. We need to prepare for dialysis." The word dialysis made my stomach churn. "I've asked administration to contact your financial guarantor, your son, Mr. Adrian Moore." My heart raced. "He's coming," Dr. Lawson said. "He said he's on his way." About 30 minutes later, Adrian appeared at the doorway, neatly dressed, tired-looking. "Mom, how did you end up fainting?" he said, irritation mixed with concern. "I'm sorry for troubling you," I automatically said. Dr. Lawson stood at the foot of the bed. "Mr. Moore, Your mother's condition is serious. Dialysis will require frequent hospital visits. The cost is substantial. We need a guarantor." Adrian exhaled heavily. "Doctor, honestly, I'm stretched thin. The house renovation, higher installments, job uncertainty. I can't carry everything." "She is your mother," Dr. Lawson said sharply. "She gave you a kidney to save your life." Adrian stared at the floor. "I know, doctor, but if I collapse, what happens to my children?" I spoke quickly. "Please, doctor, don't push him. Adrian has always carried everything. I don't want to be a burden." The words slipped out automatically. Old habits, always defending him. Dr. Lawson looked at me. "That's exactly why you need to be considered now," he said firmly. "Your life has value too." After he left, the room fell silent. Adrian sat rubbing his temples. "Mom, I'm tired," he whispered. "Ever since I was little, everyone said I had to succeed, be the provider. Now when I say it's heavy, people call me heartless." "I know it's heavy," I replied softly, "but I'm afraid of being alone." "I'm not abandoning you," he protested. "I'm just trying to find the most realistic solution. That's why about the house. If it's in my name, I can use it as collateral so we don't fall into poverty." "Does that include me?" I asked quietly. He fell silent. "At the time, I didn't think that far," he admitted. "All I saw was that if I failed, everything would collapse." The honesty stung. A few hours later, he left. "I'll coordinate with the nursing home about the costs," he said before going. I nodded. That evening, Dr. Lawson returned and pulled a chair closer. "Mrs. Moore, I need to ask something honestly. Before the surgery, did you truly understand the risks to yourself?" "They explained them," I replied, "but only one thing stuck. Adrian's life could be saved. Everything else passed me by." "That happens often," he said, "but regulations require full understanding. And the property documents you signed after the surgery are also problematic." I turned to him. "Problematic how?" "You were still weak, still on IVs, under anesthesia effects. It's unreasonable to expect full comprehension of documents that extensive. If one day you choose to challenge them, your condition at the time of signing could be grounds to argue the decision wasn't made with full awareness." I swallowed. "I don't intend to take My heart pounded, caught somewhere between longing and fear. The door opened. Nina peeked in. "Mrs. Moore, your family is here." Adrian entered first. "Hello, Mom." "Hello," I replied softly. I forced a smile. "Sylvia, come here, sweetheart." Sylvia ran to me and hugged me tight. "Grandma, I missed you. It smells like medicine here," she said innocently. Clara chuckled. "Well, it is a care facility, honey." Adrian placed a brown folder on the table. His eyes swept the room, pausing briefly at the empty bed beside mine. "Where's your roommate?" he asked. "He's downstairs for therapy," I answered. "Good," he murmured. Nina pretended to tidy the blanket, then said quietly, "If you need anything, press the call button, Mrs. Moore." She left the door half closed, not fully shut. For a few minutes, we made small talk. Sylvia talked about school. Clara talked about the interior design of their renovated house. I nodded along, trying to look happy, but Adrian's gaze stayed cold, as if he were holding something back. Finally, he took a deep breath. "Mom, we need to talk. Could Sylvia step outside for a moment?" Sylvia frowned. "Why?" "Go play with Nina for a bit," Clara said, stroking her hair. "Daddy will call you back." Sylvia pouted, but followed Clara to the door. As soon as it closed, The air in the room changed. Adrian pulled up a chair and sat across from me. "Mom, I'll be honest. The nursing home reported that you've been asking questions about documents, the house, the expenses. What exactly have you been telling people here?" His tone was accusatory. I instinctively shrank. "I was just shocked when I read what was in those papers," I said quietly. "I don't remember ever saying I wasn't responsible for the costs," he snapped. Clara cut in quickly. "Mom, everything was explained back then. You signed willingly. I was there." "I had just had surgery, Clara. My head was spinning. I thought it was just paperwork for transferring facilities." Adrian tapped the table, clearly agitated. "Mom, please don't create trouble. That house is our lifeline now. If you start questioning things, people will misunderstand. My reputation will suffer." "I'm not trying to ruin your name," I said. "I'm just scared. If I get seriously sick and no one takes responsibility, what am I supposed to do?" Adrian leaned forward. "Mom, I'm honestly scared too. I have 2 kids, a mortgage, an unstable job. If I have to choose, I have to protect my nuclear family first. You always said you'd do anything for me. I'm just continuing that." Those words slapped me. My own past words had turned into a weapon. Clara opened the folder and took out several new pages. "That's why, Mom, to avoid misunderstandings, our notary friend suggested an additional statement, just so there are no future claims. It's not that we distrust you. People fight over inheritance all the time these days." She slid the papers toward me with a pen. "Please sign this. It states that you are fully aware you transferred all your rights to Adrian and that you will not contest or reclaim anything. In return, we guarantee your nursing home expenses will continue to be paid." I stared at the paper. The letters danced again, just like they had in the hospital. My hands felt cold. "I have to sign again?" I whispered. Adrian exhaled sharply. "Mom, if you don't, I honestly don't know what to do. I could tell the nursing home I can't afford it anymore. Then who guarantees your care?" The threat was gentle, but unmistakable. I clenched the edge of my blanket. From outside the door, I faintly heard Sylvia laughing, probably with Nina. Images of my grandchildren filled my mind. "If I cause trouble, will you be angry with me?" I asked softly. "Will you be angry with Sylvia, too?" Adrian hesitated. "I just want you not to make our lives harder." "So am I the one making it hard?" Pain crept into my chest. Clara responded quickly. "We're not saying that, Mom, but if you keep digging into old documents, people will think we're unfilial children. We're just being realistic." I closed my eyes. Leonard Harris's voice echoed in my head. "If you stay silent, you'll be the one destroyed." But in front of me was Sylvia, who might grow up thinking this was somehow her fault. Slowly, I pushed the papers back to Clara. "I need time to think," I said. "My head still hurts. I don't want to sign anything in this condition. You said it yourselves. The world can be cruel." Adrian stared at me, shocked. "Mom, I'm not saying I don't trust you," I added quickly. "I'm just afraid of making the wrong decision. The doctor said my brain is exhausted too. If I decide, I want to be fully conscious." Silence stretched between us. Then Adrian leaned back, his face hardening. "Fine," he said coldly. "Do whatever you want, but don't blame me if things get worse." Clara gathered the papers roughly. "All right then, we should go. The kids are tired." As they opened the door, a small voice rang out. "Dad, Mom, why are you yelling at Grandma?" It was Sylvia. She stood in the hallway, eyes watery. Adrian quickly pulled her away. "We're not yelling, just having a serious talk." I caught one last look at Sylvia's face. Guilt was written all over it, as if she thought she was the reason for everything. My chest tightened. They left without a hug. The door closed softly. The room fell silent again. A few minutes later, Nina returned, tense. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Moore. I overheard some of it. The hallway carries sound." "What did you hear?" I asked quietly. "Enough to know they brought new papers, and enough to know they're ready to stop being your guarantor if you don't comply." I exhaled shakily. "I can't sign again, Nina. Once was enough." Nina sat down, serious. "I'm going to the administration office. Mr. Moore spoke with the director earlier. I want to make sure they don't file anything behind your back." That afternoon, as I drifted half asleep, I faintly heard voices from the office hallway. The director's voice. "So you want us to document that Mrs. Moore is often confused, forgetful, and experiencing hallucinations?" Adrian's voice, calm, firm. "Yes, it's not a lie. She does forget things, doesn't she? I don't want anyone accusing me of taking advantage of a sick parent." My heart sank. They weren't just trying to take my property. They were trying to take my voice, my sanity. That night, Nina returned, tense. "They asked us to write a report describing you as mentally declining. The director almost agreed, but I refused to sign anything untrue." I looked at her, fear and relief mixed. "If they succeed, anything I say later will be dismissed as delusion," I whispered. "Yes," Nina nodded. "That's why you can't face this alone. Leonard and I will be witnesses. You must protect yourself. Your voice cannot be erased." A few days after that confrontation, heavy clouds hung over the nursing home. My legs were still swollen, but my head felt clearer. That morning, Dr. Michael Lawson arrived with a woman I had never seen before. She was neatly dressed and carried a thick folder. "Mrs. Moore," Dr. Lawson said, "this is Miss Laura Bennett from the Senior Legal Aid Center. I explained part of your situation, without mentioning your son's name. She's willing to help if you are." Ms. Bennett smiled gently. "I often handle cases where elderly parents face legal pressure from family over property or care. I won't force you. I just want to explain your options." The word property made my stomach twist. "I don't want to fight over assets," I said quickly. "I can't bear the thought of opposing my own child." "I understand," she replied. "But this isn't only about property. It's about your rights to housing, to health care, and to being treated with dignity. Sometimes we have to say no so people stop trampling us." "He used to say that," I whispered. "He said, 'If you're ever abandoned in your old age, may God be angry with me.'" I never imagined the first thing to rebel would be my kidney. Marianne looked at me closely. "Helen, you've always been too soft on Adrian. When he used to yell about tuition money, you just cried alone in the kitchen. Now you see the result." I closed my eyes briefly. Another memory surfaced. The day I sold a small piece of land I had inherited from my parents to fund Adrian's first business venture. That business failed, and he accused me of bringing bad luck. Years later, he succeeded elsewhere, but my contribution vanished from the story. Miss Laura Bennett, who had followed us on her own motorcycle, arrived at the house. She read the letter carefully. "This is very important, Mrs. Moore," she said. "This will can counter the transfer documents Adrian prepared, especially if we can prove you signed those papers while you were physically and mentally weakened." "So I can take the house back?" I asked. "Careful," she replied. "At the very least, it can be challenged. The final outcome may not be the house returning to you 100%, but there can be a redistribution with binding provisions for your health care. What matters is that you are no longer left with nothing." I stared at the folder for a long time, relief mixed with sadness. I don't want to see Adrian completely destroyed. I just don't want to die like this. "Protecting yourself is not a sin," Miss Bennet said gently, "and sometimes people only learn when consequences finally exist. If you've always covered everything for him, he never learned how much harm he caused." On the way back to Cleveland, Ohio, I sat in a wheelchair inside the car, the will resting on my lap. The road rocked gently beneath us. Nina turned from the front seat. "Mrs. Moore, if this goes to court, are you ready?" "I'm scared," I answered honestly, "but I'm more afraid of staying silent. If I die, maybe I'll be at peace, but Sylvia and Ryan will grow up believing it's okay to discard parents once they're old." Dr. Michael Lawson nodded slowly. "If you move forward, I will testify about your medical condition. I performed the surgery. I know exactly when you were still under the influence of anesthesia." I took a deep breath. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. Back at the nursing home, Leonard Harris was already waiting in the room. "So," he asked as Nina wheeled me in. I lifted the folder. My husband was wiser than I ever gave him credit for. He planned for the worst. His will might be the wake-up call my son never expected. Leonard chuckled softly, then turned serious. "So now you have a weapon. The question is, will you use it or throw it away again for the sake of your only child?" I fell silent. Then I looked at the three of them, Nina, Dr. Lawson, and Leonard. A new courage slowly took root. "I don't want to pretend I'm blind anymore," I said calmly but firmly. "If I have to speak before a judge, I will. If I have to reveal everything, I will. Not for revenge, but so I can live with my head held high, even with just one kidney." Inside my heart was a voice I had silenced for years, a voice that said I had the right to be angry, the right to defend myself. This time, I chose to listen. The day of the hearing finally arrived. Early in the morning, Nina came to my room wearing neat clothes, not her nursing uniform, her hair tied back, her face tense. "Ready, Mrs. Moore?" "If I wait until I'm ready, I'll never go, so let's just go." Leonard sat on the bed wearing a worn but carefully ironed shirt. "Relax," he attempted humor. "I practice speaking in front of the mirror. If my memory fails, I'll pretend to cough." We left together. Miss Laura Bennett was waiting outside the nursing home with her car. Dr. Lawson sat beside her, a thick folder on his lap. In front of the Cuyahoga County Courthouse, I saw people holding cameras and phones. "Local reporters," Miss Bennett whispered. "Since the story about a kidney donor being sent to a nursing home spread through community groups, people are watching. Don't worry, we're not seeking attention, but when eyes are watching, people tend to act more carefully." I lowered my gaze. I felt embarrassed, yet there was a small, shameful sense of satisfaction. In the mediation room, the air was cold. On one side of the table, I sat in my wheelchair with Miss Bennett and Nina. Across from us sat Adrian and Clara Moore, accompanied by a suited attorney. They looked polished, but Adrian's face was pale. Behind them, I saw Sylvia, clutching her bag, eyes wide. A middle-aged mediator with glasses opened the file. Let's begin. This case concerns Mrs. Moore's objection to the transfer of her home and termination of health care guarantees by her son, Mr. Adrian Moore. We will attempt mediation first. Miss Bennet stood, her voice steady. Your Honor, my client donated a kidney to save her son's life 5 days after surgery, while still weak and under the influence of anesthesia. She was asked to sign documents transferring all her assets and releasing her son from financial responsibility. There was no full explanation and no delay until she recovered. Adrian's attorney interrupted. My client was merely organizing administrative matters. The house was always intended for him. There was no coercion. Mrs. Moore stated she was willing. We don't deny her willingness, Miss Bennet replied calmly. What we question is the exploitation of her weakened condition to strip her of all rights while simultaneously abandoning responsibility. She raised a document. This is the will of Robert Moore, Mrs. Moore's husband. It clearly states the house and savings belong to Mrs. Moore for her lifetime. Only afterward may they be transferred to Adrian, on the condition that he treats his mother properly. If he fails, his rights may be revoked. The mediator skimmed the document and nodded. These are medical records and testimony from the attending physician, confirming that Mrs. Moore was not in a condition suitable for understanding long-term legal consequences at the time of signing. Dr. Lawson was called forward. I am Dr. Michael Lawson, internal medicine specialist. I led the kidney transplant between Mrs. Moore and Mr. Moore. In my professional opinion, the timing of the document signing was inappropriate. The patient had not fully regained cognitive clarity. Adrian's attorney tried to challenge him. You cannot definitively say she did not understand the documents. I can state she was in pain, dizzy, and repeatedly forgot recent conversations. And had she not insisted herself, I would not have approved her as a donor at her age. Then Nina stood. My name is Nina. I'm a nurse at the nursing home where Mrs. Moore resides. I personally witnessed her condition upon arrival, still weak, barely able to walk. I photographed her for intake records. The dates are clear. She inhaled. Recently, I was asked to help draft a report portraying Mrs. Moore as confused and hallucinating to make her appear senile. I refused. She is often sad, but her mind is clear. Whispers spread across the room. Adrian's attorney looked agitated. That was merely an internal documentation initiative. I heard Mr. Moore directly request the report, Nina cut in firmly. So no one accuses me of exploiting a sick parent. Adrian flushed red. It was concern, he protested. I was afraid she might say things later. She forgets things. All eyes turned to me. The mediator looked at me gently. Mrs. Moore, please speak. I took a deep breath. My hands were cold, but my voice had to come out. Since Adrian was a child, I lived for him. I sold jewelry, sold land, built a shop, built a house. I made mistakes. Maybe I spoiled him too much. When he yelled that we were poor, I cried alone in the kitchen. When he apologized, I pretended to forget. I turned toward Adrian. He stared at the floor. When the doctor said his kidneys were failing, I didn't think of anything but keeping him alive. If I had to give my kidney, I gave it. I signed the surgery consent willingly. My voice shook, but I went on. What I wasn't prepared for was being sent to a nursing home afterward, losing my house, being written off as After the session ended, We walked out of the courtroom. In the hallway, several local reporters raised their phones, snapping pictures. One of them shouted at Adrian, "Is it true you sent your mother to a nursing home after taking her kidney?" Adrian brushed it off, his face tense. "The media always exaggerates," he muttered, but I knew what he was really thinking. His coworkers would all see this. A few hours later, maybe from the pressure, maybe because his illness was never fully under control, Adrian suddenly clutched his chest. His face went pale, his breathing shallow. "Clara!" he gasped, panicked. "I'm dizzy. My stomach hurts." Dr. Michael Lawson, who was still near the courthouse, rushed over. "Take him to the hospital, now." We all returned to the hospital. In the ER, Adrian lay on the bed, his face tight with pain. The monitor beeped softly. I sat in my wheelchair in the hallway. Not far from me, Clara paced back and forth, panic written all over her face. After a while, Adrian turned his head toward me. His eyes were red. "Mom." I moved closer. Clara stepped aside, still clutching her phone with trembling hands. If my kidney fails again, if I need another donor, would you still help me?" The question hung in the air. Before, I would have answered without thinking, yes. Now, I looked at my son for a long time. I saw fear, I saw regret, and I also saw the old habit, still relying on my sacrifice. I reached for his hand, held it, and spoke softly. "I gave you one kidney because I believed your life was more important than anything else. But now I understand, life isn't just about saving the body, it's about saving the soul too. I won't sacrifice myself again, and I won't sacrifice anyone else, your children included, to save you from the consequences of your own choices." He swallowed hard. "So you don't love me anymore?" I shook my head. "It's because I love you that I'm stopping you from running away from consequences. I was wrong all these years, covering for you, always saying you were right. Look at us now. You almost lost everything. I almost lost my life. Let it stop here." Tears streamed down his face. I kept holding his hand, and for the first time, I felt I was standing upright in front of my own child. Several months passed after that day in the hospital. Adrian did not fall back into complete kidney failure, but the doctor said his kidney function had declined again. He needed regular checkups, strict medication, and had to avoid stress and sleepless nights. On one hand, I was relieved. On the other, I knew the fear that used to belong only to me now lived in him too. Our mediation ended with a formal agreement. With legal assistance, the house was returned to my name, but with a written arrangement. Part of the house could still be occupied by Adrian and his children. The rest I could use as I saw fit. Most importantly, part of the property was secured as collateral for my dialysis and medical care. Adrian was also legally reinstated as my primary medical guarantor. "How long do I have to carry this responsibility?" Adrian asked back then, exhaustion in his voice. "Until you learn," I replied shortly. "Until you realize you're not the only one who deserves a peaceful life." Not long after, more news came. The company Adrian worked for let him go. They never said it was because of my case, but I knew the office gossip must have spread. Several business deals were canceled. Clara couldn't take it anymore. One day she came alone to the nursing home. Her face looked thinner, her makeup light. "Mom," she said softly, "I want to apologize. I pushed Adrian back then. I was afraid of being poor, afraid of falling in status. I thought once everything was secured, I'd feel calm." "You're human. Fear is normal, but the way you handled it was wrong." I'm staying at my parents' house now. Adrian and I are separated for the moment. I can't stand watching him get angry at everyone without ever looking at himself. The kids are with me. I won't stop them from seeing their father." I nodded. "Take good care of Silva and Ryan. Don't use them as tools for revenge." Clara broke down crying. "Thank you, Mom." I no longer lived full-time in the nursing home. With help from a foundation and the legal settlement, I rented a small room near the dialysis clinic in Cleveland, Ohio. The nursing home remained my official address, but I finally had a space of my own. Nina often stopped by, sometimes even stayed overnight if her schedule allowed. "It's nice, isn't it?" Nina said while sweeping, "having a place that's truly yours, even if it's small." I've spent too long feeling like a guest in my own life. Now this tiny place gives me something bigger, certainty that I won't be thrown out any time. Dialysis was exhausting, but I grew used to it. In that room, everyone had their own story. Some were accompanied by their children, some were alone. Even when I came by myself, I knew that outside those walls there were people who would look for me if I disappeared. Nina, Leonard Harris, Dr. Michael Lawson, and my 2 grandchildren. Leonard Harris eventually fell seriously ill and never woke up again. Before that, we had one last conversation. "Looks like it's my turn first," he said with a crooked smile. "If I meet your late husband up there, I'll tell him you finally found your courage. I'll tell him I just read his will properly now and say I'm sorry, I understood too late." We laughed softly. When he passed, I was sad, but I also felt he had completed his role in my life. Silva and Ryan now visited every weekend. Sometimes they stayed over at my little rental. The 3 of us slept squeezed together on a thin mattress. "Grandma, I brought my report card," Silva said one day, handing me the booklet. "I ranked 3rd. "Smart girl," I said, kissing her forehead. "But rankings aren't everything. Never forget the people who helped you learn how to walk." "Who's that?" she asked, giggling. "The people around you," I replied. "Your mom, your teachers, and one day maybe you'll help someone else stand too." Ryan was drawing on the floor. He held up his paper. "This is Grandma doing dialysis. This is the machine, this is the tube, this is the blood." I laughed softly. "Why draw all of it?" "The teacher said to draw scary things so they're not so scary anymore," he answered innocently. Sometimes in the evenings, we video called Adrian. He lived in the simpler part of the house. He looked older than his age. "Hi, Grandma," he said softly on the screen. "Hi, how are you?" "Still looking for work," he replied. "Some companies are hesitant because of what happened, but I know this is the harvest of what I planted." There was a pause. Before, I would have rushed to comfort him. Now I stayed silent, letting him carry the weight of his own words. "Mom," Adrian asked once when he accompanied me to dialysis, "I know I can't ask you to forget everything, but can I still come? Come as what?" "As your mother?" I asked. He exhaled. "As a son, or, if not, as someone who was deeply hurt and deeply hurt others and trying to relearn." My answer was simple. You can come as someone who truly wants to see, not just to be excused. If you come like that, my door won't be closed. He nodded, eyes wet. We didn't hug dramatically. I only patted his shoulder gently. There was distance, but it was far healthier than the false closeness we once had. One afternoon, after the children went home with Clara, I sat in front of my little rental room watching the sky turn orange. The surgical scar on my abdomen still ached when the air grew cold, but I had made peace with it. The scar was a reminder, not a whip. Nina sat beside me, sipping warm tea. When you think about it, she said, your life now is far from comfortable. Dialysis, a tiny room, family drama, but you look calmer. I used to have a bigger house, but I felt like a guest in my own home. Now I have a tiny rental, but on paper and in my own head, my rights are acknowledged. And most importantly, I've stopped pretending I'm not hurting. Hurt from what? Nina asked. A wounded heart, I answered. Kidney failure can be treated with dialysis. A wounded heart can only heal when we dare to look at the pain and say, yes, I was hurt, and I refuse to be hurt like this again. Nina nodded. Do you regret it? I regret realizing it too late, but I don't regret giving my kidney